Hi, I'm Carmen,
And I'm Steven, and this is Vienna Past and Present.
where we walk through the gilded and sometimes not so gilded halls of Vienna's history.
So, Carmen, what are we talking about today?
Well, I've got a string of letters for us today. AEIOU. What do you make of those letters?
Well, I'm getting elementary school learning the alphabet vibes. How close am I?
A little lesson in your vowels. Yeah, not quite. It's not a random set of letters, and it's also not a lesson in your vowels. It's a little bit more of a secret code, actually.
Okay. People love secret codes, they love unsolved mysteries, they like I Spy games, and this story has all of those, allegedly.
Right. And it's a secret code that is inscribed in lots of books and buildings in and around Vienna itself and in the Austrian lands in general. And it's something you could play a good I Spy game with.
So what is it? Where do we see it today?
So it is a string of letters or vowels, and it is the vowels in the correct order, right? A-E-I-O-U.
Okay.
Every time I say it, I feel like I should sing it. A-E-I-O-U. I don't know, it sounds like a jingle.
I don't know that song, so I like that.
But it's not a jingle. It's something that you can see inscribed in different buildings around Vienna, like I said. So you can see it in the St. Ruprecht's Church, which is the oldest church in Vienna from, I don't know it exactly now, but like the 12th century, a very old church.
Okay.
Then you have it on the wall of the Chancellor's office here in Vienna. There's a cathedral in Graz, which is the second largest city in Austria, where you can find these letters inscribed. And there's dozens of buildings in a suburb of Vienna called Wiener Neudorf, where you will find it. I think there's over 100 buildings or so where this inscription has been found. So it's kind of common throughout the Austrian lands, especially in and around the area of Styria, so the southern part of Austria, and in and around Vienna. You will
Okay.
see this quite often. But it's a bit of a mystery.
Okay, that's a lot of places. What do we know?
So what we do actually know about it is we know who it's from, and the person who it's associated with is Frederick III, who was the Holy Roman Emperor from 1452 until 1493, which I believe made him the longest serving Holy Roman Emperor.
Okay.
Over 40 years is a pretty impressive reign. And so the Holy Roman Empire, we're not going to talk too much about this. I think that should be its own episode at some stage, sort of how the Holy Roman Empire connected with Austria and the Habsburgs. But just very briefly, the Holy Roman Empire existed from the time of Charlemagne, so he was the very first one, until 1806. But from 1438, the Holy Roman Emperor was always the Habsburg ruler, with the exception of 5 years in the 1740s. So it's super closely connected with the Habsburgs, and effectively for the vast majority of the Holy Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Emperor was always the Habsburg ruler.
Sounds like a Habsburg kind of move, all right? Like they would find some way to use this to extend their power. So nice work, Habsburgs.
That's a good point, yeah. The Habsburgs were pretty creative in how they extended their power, and this was one of those ways, marriage being the other one that comes to mind. So we'll have to delve into that a little bit more in some other episode, I think. But for our purposes here, what do we know about these letters? So they come from Frederick III, like I said, who was the Holy Roman Emperor in the 15th century. But before he was the Holy Roman Emperor, he was the Duke of Styria, which is this southern part of Austria that I mentioned before. And AEIOU, this inscription, can be found in a lot of places in Styria as well. And what we know about Frederick III is that he was very interested in alchemy, which was common at the time, right? Alchemy was more or less chemistry of its day.
Right. And, just a little aside, right? Back then, wasn't it often like, what things can we mix together to just create gold spontaneously? Like that's kind of what they were trying to do often, right?
Right, as far as I understand it. They were trying to make gold, but at the end of the day, what they really were doing was chemistry, right? Mixing different things together and getting other substances out of it. I mean, gold being the goal, which I think was never achieved, but,
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah.
Don't think they quite ever got to that, but they did get to some other things. So he was one of these people that was very interested in alchemy, but he was also very interested in different codes and symbolism and ciphers, which corresponds very closely to this AEIOU inscription that is associated with him.
Okay, so did it serve a purpose in this time? Like, was it maybe kind of his calling card? That's kind of the vibe I'm getting so far.
It's not exactly clear if it served an explicit purpose, but it seems to have been used as a personal signature of his.
Okay.
So buildings that he was somehow involved in or that he commissioned, he would have it inscribed. And often, if you look it up, if you Google images of this, it has a really cool, funky font, usually. So it's kind of inscribed. It looks almost like sort of like a rune kind of font. It's a cool font that is used for it.
Okay. Like it's consistent throughout these, or more or less consistent, or?
I don't know if it's consistent because there are so many of these inscriptions, but some of the more famous ones that you'll see pictures of have this
Okay.
kind of very distinct font. But I couldn't say now if they are the more famous ones because they have this cool font or if that is consistent across all of these inscriptions.
Okay. All right. Some contain a cool font. All right. That's cool enough for me.
You can go on a little scavenger hunt in the city and see what you find and then maybe report
Yeah.
back if they are consistent or not. But it's not just in the buildings that he was involved in. Also in his letters and his other writings, he would often sign off with this AEIOU thing,
Oh.
or he would include it somehow in his writings.
Okay.
So it's something that he used in association with himself and in his own writings and then also added to buildings. If it had any specific purpose, it's unknown, but presumably it was related to his interest in secret codes, although even at the time it was a mystery. He himself never officially explained the meaning, and even in his day, people puzzled over what this thing could mean and what he was trying to say with this sequence of vowels.
Okay, so like you're saying, people naturally kind of went wild with this. What was the former theory? Because as we're going to get to, this theory has evolved over time as to what this means. So what was the former one?
Right. There have been many, many theories. So ever since the 1400s, when he was inscribing this stuff all over the place, people have been trying to interpret it. So more than 300 explanations have been suggested in both Latin and in German. And actually, that's sort of the first question. Is it even a German phrase or a Latin phrase? Does it stand for something in German or in Latin? And the underlying assumption, of course, is that it stands for some kind of phrase,
Right.
which isn't 100% known, but that's the assumption, that it stands for some kind of phrase, either in Latin or in German. And the main explanation that has emerged, or the kind of general theory around this that most people here in Austria learn, is it comes from a notebook from the 1600s that was discovered. The notebook itself was from Frederick III's time, but it was discovered in the 1600s. It was found in the Habsburg archives, and it included the phrase in it. Oh God, I'm going to really mangle this because this is in Latin. I'm going to go for it.
You get to mangle words for once in a different language. Go for it.
Well, if I'm going to mangle words, I'm going to do it in a dead language where hopefully nobody can tell me if it's right or wrong.
You're right. That's much safer move.
But I also never studied Latin, so I really don't know how to pronounce this. Anyway, the phrase, in my probably very poor rendering of it, is Austriae est imperare orbi universo, which is translated into English as all the world is dominated by Austria.
Okay.
Or in German, alles Erdreich ist Österreich untertan. And that has become the most common explanation. So the world is dominated by Austria. This is what's taught in Austrian schools. It's what I also learned at university here. And if you ask people to the extent that they know what it means, this is most likely what they will tell you.
Okay. World domination. That's kind of provocative, I will say. But from a family that forged documents to make themselves archdukes over everyone else, I can't say I'm completely surprised by it. So, seems like a very Habsburg move. Also an attempt to make Austria historically more important than it was. I guess this explanation's been around for a while, or maybe Austria, it was much more powerful like 100 and 200 years ago and kind of had a different place in the world stage. Maybe it made more sense, or I don't know, but maybe hearing it now, it's kind of like, it seems off-brand maybe for Austria, or like the livable Austria with great skiing that, I kind of know of as like an American who goes there as a tourist. But, thinking more about it, the Habsburgs at that time, you think about the historical context, you kind of had to win everything or your whole family might get slaughtered, right? That's sort of how things worked back then. So I wonder if I would be trying to, do the same thing, right? And really go for the gold, because if you kind of half do it, you could, end up dead in a different or worse way. I don't know. But yeah, I've kind of been watching Game of Thrones again, so that's where that's coming from.
I guess you do have to be bold, and Frederick III was
Yeah.
Holy Roman Emperor for 40 plus years, which you don't manage by being some kind of, meek, weak leader, I guess.
Pushover. Yeah. Okay.
But I have to agree with you. From today's standpoint, it's a little bit comical to think of Austria as dominating anything, let's be real.
The entire world.
Okay, skiing. And actually, I don't know if you're following the Euro Cup, but Austria is doing very well and is kind of like a secret,
Really? Oh.
like, potential favorite to win. I mean, we all hope so. They won against the Netherlands
Okay, awesome.
last week, which
Oh, okay.
nobody expected.
That seems difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we're dominating there, but world domination is a bit of a different story.
Oh, just to tack on that, the one that we're hearing about over here is the Georgian team and how they beat Portugal. Okay, so go Georgia. I don't know if that's. I think that's the same tournament.
It is the same tournament, yes.
Okay, good.
But yeah, I
Okay.
love a good
Anyway,
little country beating a powerhouse.
yeah, yeah. Everybody likes that.
It's Austria story.
Okay, so yeah, some AEIOU vibes to the Austrian team. All
AEIOU
right.
vibes, exactly. If we manage to conquer,
Yeah.
well, I was going to say the World Cup. It's not the World Cup, it's just the Euro Cup. But next up is the World Cup, so watch out,
Yeah.
guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But anyway, to get back to the point, yes, it's a little bit ludicrous to think of Austria as some kind of global world dominating power, especially at this time, when Frederick III was the
Hmm.
Habsburg ruler in the 1300s. He was trying to even consolidate the Austrian lands, let alone expand really beyond that. And so that's
Okay.
why this theory has been questioned, because it doesn't make that much sense, right? Austria as a global power in the 1400s was really not realistic at all.
Okay. Yeah, and that's the thing. I think I'm just like, well, maybe because they did know about the New World at this point. They knew, like 1450s, I think they probably would have known.
Yeah, but Austria was in no position to be claiming any kind of world domination. To be fair, later in history, of course, the Habsburg did have a lot of possessions and a lot of land, but not at the time that Frederick III was living. And so there's a couple of reasons, that being one
Okay.
of them, that this theory has fallen out of favor, at least amongst historians. I would say it's still the most commonly repeated story amongst just random Austrians if you ask them. But there's a couple reasons
Mm-hmm.
why it's not considered all that credible anymore. One of them, like I said, Austria was not any kind of global power at the time. It didn't even really have hope of being a global power. They were having trouble even uniting the Austrian
Mm-hmm.
lands, and global ambitions were very far away. But another reason is that Frederick III, already before he became Holy Roman Emperor, when he was just the Duke of Styria, he already used this inscription at that time, and he only even became Holy Roman Emperor
Hmm.
and the Habsburg leader, resulting from the deaths of two members of his family. So he was not really intended to be the heir to the throne at any point. It kind of was through a fluke
Wow.
of
Okay.
various other people dying that he ended up ascending to that position. So that also makes it
Hmm.
unlikely that he would have had these like global domination ambitions when he was just the Duke of this small part of Austria. Although I will claim the most important part of Austria because it's the part of Austria that I'm from, but that's a small aside.
Yes. Okay. Royal blood, I'm sure, is coursing through your veins. Yeah.
Yes, Frederick III is my man.
Mm.
Um, and there's a third reason that this has also kind of been debunked, which is that the writing in the journal that this comes from does not match the other writing in the notebook. And so
Huh.
it was claimed at the time when it was discovered that it was from Frederick III, but the writing doesn't match the rest of the writing. And so most likely it was added later by somebody else.
Hmm. Okay. So, what are the most current theories then?
So it has evolved a little bit. There have been many, many theories out there. But another theory has become the front runner now and has been considered by some people to be sort of the definitive answer to this. And this is one of the oldest theories. In fact, it's been around from almost the very start, but it was discredited for a long time. That theory is that it stands for the phrase, also in Latin, amor electis injustis ordinor ultor, or
Okay.
something like that. Please don't crucify me for my terrible Latin.
We'll have this all on the show notes. Yeah.
Anyway, that thing that I just mangled should mean, in English, I am loved by the electorate and feared by the unjust. And
Okay. Hmm.
that's a phrase that's found in writings from Frederick and other contemporaries, and it's found also embedded in longer sentences within Frederick's writing, and that has been
Oh.
more or less confirmed at this stage to have been in his actual hand.
Hmm. Okay.
Although one of the reasons that it was dismissed was because a prominent historian and expert on Austria in the Middle Ages, whose name was Alphonse Lotzky, he claimed that it had been in the invention of a notary and advisor to Frederick III, and that
Hmm.
it did not come from Frederick III himself, this explanation, but that
Okay.
some advisor to him had kind of added this into the note.
Right. I guess my hot take is kind of like this one is so much more appealing to modern ears, where it's like, oh, he seems more fair and he seems a little bit more focused on, what he could actually do, like doing stuff within his electorate or within the Holy Roman Empire and not worldwide, right? But yeah, also his notary and advisor. Like at this point, for kings and for noble people, like how much can you even separate their notary and their advisor and the person themselves, right? Like, I'm sure this notary was there making him sound better all the time, writing a little bit of, what he thought would be good version of, what Frederick is saying, things like that. I just kind of assume that it's like all the paintings we see, that the painter kind of just makes them look a little bit better than they actually were. So yeah, it's like, can you separate it? But okay, maybe he didn't write it.
Yeah, good point. It's kind of the notary's job, probably on some level, or the advisor.
I would think at that point, like if he sounds bad, he would be, fired or put to death or something terrible. I would be trying to make him like sound good all the time.
Yeah, and then let them think that they came up with it, right? I mean, that's the art of it.
Totally. This is what you said. Yeah, I would be doing that all day. So yeah, there's been an update just last year in 2023.
Right. So a historian a German historian, Konstantin Langmeier, he found evidence of this phrase, so the one that I just said before, I am loved by the electorate and feared by the unjust. He found some evidence of that phrase written in Frederick's hand from 1437, which is considerably before he became the Holy Roman Emperor. And he has convincingly showed that this other historian had made an error. So the historian who claimed that it was, invented by some other advisor, he has convincingly now showed that Frederick did write this in his own hand and that most likely it was not invented by somebody else. So he has claimed to have solved the mystery once and for all.
Okay, so it's not that the translation has changed. It's just like, no, Frederick did say it himself, not this advisor, as of 2023, if you're following this. Okay, all right, well, that's an update.
Yeah, so that is kind of the stand, but there's not total consensus around this either.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, is there consensus now? I'm suspecting not, but, like, if so, what is it? And or will we ever know about this mystery?
I think at the end of the day, we'll never know for sure because he didn't explain it himself in his day. Now that it's, how many, 600 years later, and people are still kind of trying to reinterpret this, obviously there's a lot of mystery and a lot of speculation around it. So there's not total consensus around it. There are historians, and I think rightfully so, who question, first of all, whether we can ever know the answer, and also whether it even meant the same thing all the time for Frederick himself.
Yeah.
So it could have actually had many different meanings, and he could have also evolved the meaning over time. And so some historians really dispute that there even is one meaning to find, because it's very likely as well that he could have just meant it to mean different things over his time.
Yeah. Do people in Austria feel strongly about this? Like, is this a mystery everyone knows? Or like when a new translation comes, is it like, no? Then there's a protest. Like, I'm imagining not, but
There's an uproar over some obscure definition. Yeah, well, no, people don't really feel strongly about it, but most people do know at least the very first explanation that I gave, the world domination one.
okay.
I think also because it makes Austrians feel a little bit good about, maybe trying to be some kind of global player.
Yeah, I think we all have stories like that, every country and group and whatever.
Right, it makes us feel grandiose, so we kind of like it. So yeah, that the whole world is dominated by Austria. Most Austrians who grew up here will tell you that that's what it means and will have heard of that.
Okay.
So the fact that there is now quite convincingly, at least according to some historians and according to the media kind of ran with this new explanation about him being loved by the electorate and feared by the unjust, which is a very democratic message, quite contrary to the world domination.
Yeah, to me it feels more
Kind
modern.
of dictatorship, yeah, right?
Yeah.
So the media kind of ran with this, and there were lots of stories about it last year. So if you paid attention, or if you kind of, read the more historical, cultural pages of the newspaper, you would have come across this. And the media basically declared it solved, even though many historians would dispute that. So people don't really have a strong feeling about any of this. It's just a sort of interesting thing. And it is quite nice to go around the city and see these inscriptions sometimes. Like occasionally you will notice them. And so it's a bit of a fun thing if you are in Vienna as a tourist or just walking around to try to spot these inscriptions because they are around. And if you, especially if you know some places where you can find them, and then if you're in these areas where lots of these inscriptions can be found, then it can be a bit of a fun, scavenger hunt to try to see where you can find them.
Yeah. So, Carmen, when did you learn about this? Is this like Pez for you? If you recall a few episodes ago, you were like, yeah, I mean, Pez. Oh, really? It's Austrian? And then, a week later, you're like, actually, there were a bunch of Pez in my bedroom in a glass case, okay, which I will keep bringing up.
Yes, right.
So did you, like, have you known about this since you were 5 or you learned about it when you moved there or something as an adult?
Yeah, I came to this later than most Austrians would, I guess, because I didn't grow up here and I didn't go to school
Okay.
here. So I only learned about this in university because it came up in some course that I was taking, and that's where I first heard about it. But every now and then
Okay.
people will mention it. I have talked to people about it since then. It just will randomly come up occasionally. But I think it's not quite like Pez because I did, Pez was in discussion with you that I discovered that it was Austrian. I mean, I straight up did not know that a year ago or 6 months ago. AEIOU
Right.
I've known for, I would say, I don't know, 14 years or so. So it's a bit of a longer history.
Okay. You guys go back. Yeah.
We go back.
Right.
But there are a couple of funny interpretations of it as well. So like I said before, there have been lots and lots of different, theories and interpretations for what it means. And there's two that I kind of want to highlight quickly because they're just so Austrian.
Okay.
And these are sort of funny, sarcastic, explanations that people have come up with. The first one of which
Okay.
is Allererst ist Österreich verloren, which means, first of all, Austria is lost. Like, very pessimistic.
Wow. Wow. Okay, that's yeah, cynical update. It's funny though. I think it's funny.
It's a real Austrian vibe of like, yeah,
Okay.
Austria is lost, forget it. And then there's a very Viennese interpretation as well. Well, Viennese in the sense that it's a little bit in dialect, which is am Ende ist alles umsonst, which means in the end it's all for nothing or it's all in vain, which again goes in a very cynical direction.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, those are kind of funny ones.
They are kind of
Like
funny.
they seem funny and catchy.
They're kind of funny, they're catchy, and they do capture a bit of that Viennese pessimism, I guess, or cynicism, as you say. And it really does make me think
Okay.
now of like the soccer European Cup that's going on because it's the same. Austria's actually winning, everybody's shocked and doesn't know why. And like the commentator when I was watching the game the other day against the Netherlands made the comment of, "Oh, the score is 0-1 and very curiously Austria is in the lead." That's the Austrian commentator, so it's that same
AEIOU. Yeah.
AEIOU, exactly. In the end, it's all lost. That's like just the Viennese vibe.
One of those meetings, I mean, it can be whatever meaning you want in the end, depending on the result. So,
I just like the Viennese-ness of it. So what is your take on it? What have you learned here today?
gosh, so yeah, to me, it does have like a cool scavenger hunt kind of vibe. I can really see how people would see this. You might feel this connection with a certain person, right? You're like, oh my gosh, this is his inscription. Like, and I think it's cool that, a monarch would leave such a sort of personal mark everywhere. And I'm trying to think about examples of that, right? And I can't really think of any offhand where a monarch or something in a country would leave such personal like signature sort of stuff everywhere. So that feels kind of unique. Like I'm sure that's out there somewhere else, but I'm just not really aware of that in Japan, say, or like in the UK, or like you'd have a palace or you'd have like portraits of their wives or something. But yeah, this does seem very personal and interesting. I think the mystery aspect is really kind of cool. And yeah, I know historians kind of keep going back to it, but I'm almost surprised that this isn't more of a thing that everyone's trying to figure out, right? Or like have a theory about, or like that it's not on like more T-shirts or something. But maybe this is just my kind of American take on it, right? So yeah, to me it's cool.
Yeah, I like how you took it straight to a capitalist.
Oh,
Let's print some
totally. Because I
T-shirts.
think, It's like there's all this kind of identity stuff lately, right? Like with cities, especially, and not even lately, but you think about the American cities where their city flags are now like big kind of things that people buy, and like a city flag is, it's like a tattoo for a bunch of people now if your city flag is cool. So this just seems like kind of a, like a Viennese, Austrianish kind of little, if you know, sort of symbol thing. But now that I'm thinking about it, would I wear a shirt that just says AEIOU? It's like I teach English. Like it might say that as well. So maybe it's just it wouldn't actually play out that way, but that's where my mind goes with it. So I think that's cool. I am definitely going to look around next time I'm there for little bits of this.
Yeah, it's a good one to keep your eye out for and just see if you can spot it
Yeah.
somewhere.
Okay, so we will update when the next theory comes out. Okay, come here first.
And it's also a good one to educate your Austrians, who will definitely tell you it means that Austria,
Right.
is going to dominate the world. And then you can tell them about how that's most likely not true.
Or it's all lost, one or the other.
Exactly, or it's all pointless
Mm-hmm.
and we should just give up. All right, well, that is it for our show. Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, share with your friends or leave us a 5-star review. And if you didn't like it, then, well, you don't have to worry about that review.
You can find us on social medias at Vienna Past and Present or Vienna Past and Pres on Instagram. Send us your episode ideas at viennapastandpresent@gmail.com.
Auf Wiedersehen, pfiat euch, Baba.
Bye.